A dozen men sit down to eat like nothing in the world can touch them. And I'm telling you right now, that's the first mistake. Because when a table gets that loud, when the laughter gets that careless, it means somebody in the room thinks they're untouchable. And somebody else is counting. Wakefield Plantation is the kind of place where the heat sticks to your skin like a second shirt. The kind of place where the big house looks clean from a distance and rotten up close. Tonight they got the windows open trying to let the night air push the stink out. But you can't air out what's coming. Inside that dining room, 12 white men spread out like kings. Not because they need the space, because they like the message. Long table, heavy silver, glassware that sounds like money when it clinks. Candles throwing warm light over cold souls. These ain't farmers, these ain't workers, these are decision makers. The kind of men who don't raise their voice because everybody else already learned to listen. The governor is there, sweating through his fine vest, laughing too hard at jokes that weren't funny the first time. A judge with a cigar and dead eyes flicking ash like it's nothing. A colonel with a belly pushing against an old uniform like the war never ended for him, just changed targets. A banker, a broker, a couple planters, even a minister with clean cuffs and dirty hands. And at the head of it all, Richard Wakefield. That's the spider. Wakefield doesn't need to shout. He just lifts his glass and the whole room leans toward him like iron to a magnet. He smiles the way a man smiles when he thinks the world agrees with him. "Gentlemen," he says, and the word lands heavy like he's naming property. "We've had a good run." They chuckle, they nod. They don't ask what he means because they already know. A group like this doesn't need to say the ugly part out loud. They share it. It sits between them like a private joke. Wakefield talks about order, about keeping things in place, about how fear needs maintenance the same way fences do. He makes it sound like he's talking about weather and crops, not lives. And every man at that table understands the real language. They didn't come for a meal. They came to celebrate what they got away with. That's why the room smells so rich it almost turns violent. Butter, garlic, roasted meat, tobacco. Sweat under cologne. A chandelier up top pretending it's all civilized while the plates underneath tell the real story. Wakefield spreads his hands like a preacher. "Tonight," he says, "we eat well." Then he turns his head toward the far end of the room, toward the shadows by the doorway, and his voice changes just enough to remind everybody who gives orders here. Josephine. One word like snapping a leash. A woman steps forward, plain dress, clean apron, sleeves rolled up like she's done this work longer than these men have been alive. Headscarf tied tight, arms strong from lifting iron and stirring pots that could feed armies. She keeps her eyes low, not out of fear, out of survival. There's a difference. Men like this never learned it. Wakefield introduces her like she's part of the furniture, like a trophy he bought. Brags about her cooking, talks about her hands like they're a tool he owns. The banker raises his glass. The colonel laughs. The minister calls it a blessing. Josephine gives them what they expect. Soft voice, polite words, no heat on the outside. But I've been around long enough to know the quiet ones are the most dangerous. Loud is for people trying to convince you they're powerful. Real power doesn't beg to be noticed. Wakefield tells her to start the courses. She nods once and turns away. Now we're in the kitchen, and the kitchen is a different country. Fire on brick, steam rolling off pots, knives hitting wood in steady rhythm, metal clanging, the air thick with fat and heat and work. Young boys moving fast because slow gets you blamed for everything. Josephine stands at the center like a general who doesn't need to yell. She doesn't waste motion. She doesn't waste words. On the counter sits a platter under a domed lid, big, heavy, the kind of thing that takes two teenagers to lift without trembling. They reach for it. Josephine stops them with a look, not a shout. Just a look that says, if you fumble this, you're not dropping dinner, you're dropping someone's plan. Hands steady, she tells them, calm as a Sunday morning. You spill, you'll wish it was only the china that breaks. The boys swallow hard. They grip tighter. Josephine lays her palm on the lid for a moment, feeling the heat push back. A thin breath of steam slips out around the edge, carrying a smell so deep it makes your mouth water before your mind catches up. Meat, wine, herbs, Roots cook down until they stop being vegetables and start being memory. And underneath that smell, there's something else. Something you don't notice unless you've lived long enough to know that some meals don't just feed you. Some meals accuse you. Josephine leans close to the boys like she's blessing them. Go on, she says. Feed 'em. The platter moves out. She follows to the doorway but doesn't step into the dining room light. She stays right where shadow holds her, because that's what she's learned. You don't stand in front of men like this unless you're ready to make them look at you. The platter lands on the table. Conversation pauses. Every fork hangs in the air for half a second. That's the moment right there, when even powerful men turn into hungry children. Wakefield performs, spreading his hands again, talking about humble cuts turned into royalty, like he's the magician. The governor grabs the carving knife like he paid for the privilege. He slices into the roast and the meat gives up easy, falling apart like it's been convinced to surrender. First bite. You can see it on his face. Surprise, pleasure. A little panic, too, because nothing that good should come without a price. But he doesn't stop chewing. Men like him never do. He smiles with his mouth full. He praises Wakefield. Wakefield redirects the compliment back toward the kitchen like he's generous, like he's fair. You can thank Josephine, he says, and Josephine, still in the doorway, watches the governor swallow. That's the part nobody at the table understands. They think swallowing is the end of the story. For Josephine, it's the beginning, because that sauce on his plate, that depth he can't name, that warmth spreading through him, that isn't just skill, that's time, that's 3 years of patience. That's a woman building something in the dark, one quiet spoonful at a time, while these men laugh and clap each other on the back like the world belongs to them. And tonight she didn't just cook. Tonight she set the board. Back at the table, the men settle into their confidence again. They refill glasses, they joke. They talk about business, about crops, about law, about problems like people are paperwork. They don't notice Josephine's hands are too clean for a woman who's been working over fire all day. They don't notice she hasn't eaten. They don't notice the way she keeps touching her apron pocket like she's checking for something small and certain. A matchbox feels light in your hand, but it carries the weight of a decision. Wakefield lifts his glass again, smiling at his own little kingdom, and he calls out toward the kitchen like he's calling a dog. Josephine, he says, come let these gentlemen thank you proper. She steps forward this time, and when her eyes finally rise just a little, the room cools in a way the candles can't explain. Because her face isn't grateful, it isn't afraid, it's settled. Like she already knows who's leaving this room breathing, and who's about to learn what it feels like to be trapped at the center of a deal they didn't read before signing. And right as Wakefield opens his mouth to speak again, Josephine smiles. Not warm, not kind, just enough to make the judge stop chewing. Just enough to make the governor's hand tighten on his fork. Just enough to make a man wonder for the first time all night if the kitchen has been running the house this whole time. Then Josephine takes one slow breath, and the way she says her next words makes it feel like somebody just turned the lock from the outside. Y'all sure, she says softly, you want to know what you've been eating? Nobody answers her right away. That's how you know the balance just shifted. 12 men, all used to command, suddenly quiet, forks hover, glasses pause halfway to mouths. The room doesn't feel festive anymore. It feels watched, like the walls leaned in. Wakefield recovers first. He always does. Men like him survive by never letting silence belong to someone else. That's enough, he says lightly, like he's correcting a child. You've done your job well, go on back. But Josephine doesn't move. She stays right there, hands folded, posture calm, not stiff. Calm like a woman who already finished the hard part. I've been doing my job, she says, just maybe not the way you thought. The governor clears his throat, a sound that tries to pass for confidence. What's this about, Richard? He asks, forcing a chuckle. Your cook's got a sense of humor tonight. Josephine looks at him then, really looks, long enough for him to feel it in his chest. Ain't a joke, she says. Jokes end quick. The banker shifts in his chair. This is inappropriate, he mutters. Women like her. Wakefield snaps his fingers once. That'll be enough, he says, voice hard now. Josephine, you're forgetting yourself. She tilts her head just a touch. No, sir, she replies, I remembered. That word hangs, remembered. The minister wipes his mouth with his napkin. He's sweating now, though the room hasn't gotten any hotter. Sister, he says gently, trying to sound holy, if something's troubling you, we can pray on it. Tomorrow. Josephine almost laughs, almost. You prayed already, she says. Prayed real hard right before the dogs. That lands wrong. The colonel's chair scrapes back an inch. Dogs, he asks. What dogs? Josephine's eyes never leave Wakefield now. 3 years ago, she says steady, you gentlemen decided fear was getting stale around here. Wakefield's smile tightens. His hand slides to the edge of the table. Careful, he warns. You don't want to open doors you can't close. Oh, they open themselves, she says, once you walk through. The governor laughs again, too sharp. This is absurd. You sound like you're accusing us of something. Josephine nods. I am. Silence slams down. Not polite silence. Dangerous silence. Somewhere outside, a cicada starts up, loud and ugly, like it's laughing at them. Wakefield straightens. This is the man who signs papers that ruin families and sleeps like a baby after. He's not scared yet, he's annoyed. You want to keep working in this house, he says low, you'll change your tone. Josephine finally steps closer to the table, just one step, enough that the candlelight hits her eyes full on. Working, she repeats. Sir, I've been building. The banker scoffs. Building what, gravy? Josephine's gaze flicks to him for half a second. He goes quiet without knowing why. You ever notice, she says, how a body gives up its secrets if you give it enough time? The judge stiffens. What kind of talk is this? The kind you've been avoiding, she answers. The kind that shows up anyway, in dreams, in your chest, in the middle of the night when your heart won't slow down. The minister swallows, hard. Wakefield laughs once, sharp and humorless. You're upset about the past, about that boy. The room goes cold. Josephine doesn't blink. My son, she says. No one corrects her. Wakefield presses on, voice smooth again. That was handled, lawfully, you know that. I know you gave him a head start, she replies. Same way you give yourselves excuses. The colonel shifts, face flushing. This is dangerous talk. That's what he said, Josephine answers, right before he ran. The governor pushes his chair back a little farther now. Richard, he says quietly, maybe this woman's been in the heat too long. Josephine smiles, not kind. Heat didn't make me do nothing, she says. Hunger did, memory did. She reaches into her apron pocket. Every man at that table tenses. Hands drift toward knives, canes, the table edge. Power likes to pretend it's fearless until someone reaches inside their coat. She pulls out something small, not a weapon, a little glass jar, no label. Inside, a pale powder rests like dust after a long fall. Wakefield squints. What is that? Josephine sets it on the table. It makes a soft sound, too soft for how loud it feels. That, she says, is what happens when you don't bury what you kill. The banker stands abruptly. This has gone far enough. Josephine doesn't look at him. You sat right there, she says, nodding toward his seat, when they cut him loose. The banker freezes. The governor's face drains of color. Richard, he whispers, she shouldn't know that. Wakefield's jaw tightens. Josephine steps back again, reclaiming the door. For 3 years, she says, you've been eating real well. The judge's voice cracks. Eating what? Josephine pauses, just long enough. Same thing you fed the hogs, she says. Somebody retches, dry, sharp. The minister pushes his chair back, knocking it over. This is blasphemy, he gasps. This is sickness. Josephine nods. It is. Wakefield slams his palm on the table. Enough, guards. No one comes. Of course no one comes. The house servants are gone. The doors are quieter than they should be. The air smells wrong, not food, not smoke. Oil. Josephine's hand is back in her apron pocket now, fingers curled around something else. something lighter than the jar, something that scratches when it moves. Wakefield sees it, really sees it. And for the first time tonight, the spider understands the web isn't his. You think this ends here. He snarls. You think you walk away from this. Josephine meets his eyes. I already did, she says. Behind her in the hallway no one ever paid attention to, a servant's door creaks open, and somewhere beneath the table, a thin line of fire finds the edge of a rug. Fire doesn't announce itself. It whispers first. A thin orange line crawls under the rug like it's thinking, like it's deciding who deserves to burn slow and who don't. Nobody at the table notices right away. They're still staring at Josephine, still trying to understand how the help just flipped the room. Wakefield smells it first. Not smoke. Oil. His head snaps down. Too late. Fire, someone shouts, half a second before the flame finds the tablecloth and climbs it like it's been waiting years for permission. Chairs scrape back hard now. Glass shatters. Men shout orders that don't work anymore. Authority sounds real fragile when it's coughing. Josephine doesn't move. She stands in the doorway, calm as ever, watching power run in circles. The minister trips over his own chair and goes down hard. The banker lunges for the window and finds it locked. The judge pounds on the glass like the law still listens to him. Wakefield roars her name. Josephine. She looks at him the way you look at a man who's already decided his ending, just hasn't accepted it yet. You said fear needs maintenance, she tells him, voice steady through the rising crackle. Consider this a service call. The fire spreads fast now, greedy, licks up the legs of the table, catches a coat, then another. Somebody screams when the heat kisses skin, not brave anymore, honest. The governor collapses back into his chair, clutching his chest. I can't breathe, he gasps. Josephine nods once. Neither could he. Smoke rolls low, thick and black, pressing everybody down to the truth. Eyes burn, throat seize. The room that fed 30 now can't feed a breath. Wakefield charges toward her. He doesn't make it. The rug gives way beneath him, flame biting up his pant leg. He stumbles, slams into the table he once ruled from, knocking plates and silver to the floor. The spider tangled in his own web. Josephine steps backward into the kitchen. Fire respects distance. The heat behind her is fierce, but the draft pulls the smoke away just enough. She knows this house, knows how air moves, knows which doors matter. A servant slips past her, eyes wide, clutching something under his shirt, the book. She gives him the smallest nod. Go, she says, that's all. He's gone. Behind her, the dining room becomes noise and flame and regret. Wood cracking, glass popping, men shouting names that don't answer. Wakefield crawls now, hands burned raw, pride cooked out of him. You'll die for this, he spits. Josephine crouches just enough to be heard. So will you, she says. Difference is I chose mine. She turns, walks through the servants' door they never noticed. The fire roars behind her like it's applauding. Outside, the night air hits her lungs sharp and clean. Horses scream. Someone breaks free and bolts into the dark. Servants scatter into the trees like they've rehearsed it in their sleep. Josephine doesn't run, she walks. Behind her, Wakefield Plantation becomes a furnace swallowing its own lies. Windows blow out. Roof groans. A house built on stolen breath finally exhales. No one counts who makes it out. They'll argue later, change the story. Say accident, say tragedy, say anything but truth. Josephine reaches the tree line and stops. From here, the fire looks almost beautiful. She reaches into her apron one last time and feels the small jar. Light now, almost empty. She closes her hand around it. One, she whispers, not a prayer, a tally. Then she steps into the dark where the fire can't follow and the next part of the game is already waiting. Fire cleans loud. What comes after that's quiet. By morning, Wakefield Plantation is just a blackened rumor, smoke still curling from bones of wood. Men standing around in clean coats, pointing, guessing, lying before the ash even cools. They call it an accident, they always do. Too much lamp oil, a knocked candle, old wood. Bad luck. Bad luck is when a tree falls on your house. This wasn't that. They pull bodies out wrapped in sheets. Some burned past names. Some breathing but never the same. The governor doesn't make it. The banker lives long enough to beg. Wakefield is found near the head of the table, half-charred, fingers locked around a fork like he still thought he was eating. Nobody asks where the cook went. Nobody wants that answer. In the quarters, nobody cries, they just listen. Listen to the crackle of dying embers and the way the air feels lighter, like something heavy finally stepped off their chests. Fear doesn't disappear overnight. It never does, but it stumbles. And when fear stumbles, people notice. A week passes, then another. A new overseer shows up and quits before harvest, says the land feels wrong, says he can't sleep, says he keeps dreaming about running even when he's standing still. In town, men lower their voices when Wakefield's name comes up. A judge's cousin refuses meat. A minister drinks more than he preaches. A legislator wakes up choking on dreams he won't describe. They don't connect the dots, they just feel watched. Josephine is already gone by then. Some say they saw her walking toward the river that night, apron scorched, back straight. Others swear she caught a ride on a freight wagon before dawn. Truth is, women like her don't leave footprints unless they want to. Southbound is where the air changes, where power wears different suits but still eats the same way. In New Orleans, kitchens talk, always have. A good cook doesn't need a sign. Word travels faster than smoke. They say there's a place off a narrow street where the food don't miss, where the stew settles you down and the bread tastes like memory, where the woman running the fire doesn't raise her voice but men who walk in loud leave quiet. Powerful men come through sometimes. They always do. They eat, they praise, they feel full in a way they can't explain. Then later they dream. Nothing that can be proved, nothing that can be charged, just enough to remind them that every bite has a history. Behind the kitchen shelves, high up where careless hands don't reach, sits a small jar, kept clean, kept close. No label, nobody asks. Because deep down they already know. And somewhere in the city, when a man with too much confidence laughs too hard over a plate he didn't earn, Josephine listens. Not with anger, with patience. Because the game didn't end at Wakefield. It just moved to a bigger table. Big tables attract big appetites. And appetites always tell on a man. New Orleans breathes different than the low country. Louder, faster. Greed stacked on top of greed like it's reaching for God. Money moves here. Power changes hands in alleys and back rooms, not parlors. Men wear smiles instead of uniforms, but the hunger underneath is the same. Josephine learns the rhythm quick. Morning markets. Night fires. Faces that come back again and again, always sitting in the same seats. Always ordering the same cuts. Always thinking the world bends because they paid for it. She watches. That's what separates survivors from victims. Survivors don't rush. They let people show themselves. There's one man in particular. Name never said out loud, not fully. Folks call him Mr. Landry. Owns warehouses by the river. Owns judges without shaking their hands. The kind of man who eats slow, like he's listening to his food. First time he comes in, he doesn't look at Josephine. Second time, he nods. Third time, he asks who taught her to cook like that. People who didn't get credit, she tells him. He smiles like he understands, but his eyes say he doesn't. Men like Landry don't believe in ghosts. They believe in leverage. He starts coming weekly. Brings friends, men with rings and quiet laughter. Men who talk about labor like it's a broken tool. Men who complain about runaways, about costs, about setting examples. Josephine keeps serving, the stew gets richer, the bread gets heavier, the stock gets deeper, and Landry starts dreaming. He doesn't say it at first, just eats less, drinks more. Rubs his chest when he thinks nobody sees. Then one night after everyone else leaves, he stays seated, staring at his plate like it offended him. You ever get the feeling, he says casually, that food remembers? Josephine wipes her hands on her apron. Only when it's done right, she replies. He laughs, but it's thin. I had a dream, he says. Didn't make sense. I was standing in a field I never seen before, couldn't move. Felt like the ground was holding me. She says nothing. Landry watches her closer now. You ever lose anyone? He asks. Josephine meets his eyes, calm, measured. Everybody does, she says. Some folks just don't count right. That night, Landry doesn't finish his meal. 2 days later, a dock worker tells a story, says Landry's been asking questions about her. about where she came from, about what she puts in her pots. Curiosity is dangerous, not because of what it knows, because of what it invites. Josephine checks her shelf after closing. The jar is there, but it's lighter than it should be, just a little, enough to notice. Enough to know somebody else is reaching into the game now. And that means the next move won't be hers alone. When someone touches what's yours without permission, that's not curiosity. That's a challenge. Josephine doesn't panic. Panic is for people who don't plan past sunrise. She closes the kitchen like normal, banks the fire, wipes the counters clean. Same routine, same calm, but her eyes keep counting. Landry doesn't come in the next night, or the one after that. Instead, two men she's never seen before take his usual table. Expensive coats, cheap manners, they don't eat much. They watch the room. They watch her hands, that tells her everything. Power doesn't move alone, it sends feelers first. One of the wait girls leans in while pouring water. "They asked about you," she whispers. "Where you came from, what you know." Josephine nods. "They always do." That night she changes nothing in the food. That's the trick most people never learn. When someone is testing you, you don't react. You let them think they're invisible. 3 nights later, Landry comes back. Alone, he looks older, eyes sunk, hands not as steady. He sits, orders as usual, then waves everyone off when the plate arrives. He waits until the room thins. "You're careful," he says quietly. "I respect that." Josephine doesn't answer. "I lost sleep," he continues. "Saw things I don't believe in, thought about you more than I should." "That happens," she says, "when a man eats past his conscience." Landry exhales slowly. "I had someone look around." There it is. Josephine meets his gaze. No fear, just acknowledgement. "And," she asks. "And they didn't find anything," he says, "which tells me you're smarter than the people I pay." Silence stretches. Landry leans back. "I don't want trouble," he says. "I want understanding." Josephine folds her hands. "Understanding costs." He smiles faintly. "Everything does." That's when she knows. He's not here to expose her. He's here to own her. Men like Landry don't destroy weapons. They put them on payroll. "I could protect you," he says. "Make sure nobody ever asks the wrong questions again." Josephine's voice stays level. "And what do you want in return?" He taps the table once. "Your talent directed." Directed like a gun. She thinks of Wakefield, of Briggs, of the ledger in her head, of how power always thinks it can borrow what it doesn't deserve. She stands, lifts his plate, and takes it back toward the kitchen. "I'll think on it," she says. Landry watches her go, eyes sharp. As she reaches the door, she says one more thing, not turning around. "You ever steal from my kitchen again," she says softly, "you won't need dreams to feel what's missing." That night, Josephine doesn't sleep. Neither does Landry. And somewhere between them, the city holds its breath, waiting to see whether this turns into a partnership or a war. War don't always start with gunfire. Sometimes it starts with a favor. Landry doesn't push right away. That's how you know he's dangerous. Men who rush want control. Men who wait already think they have it. A week passes. Then another. Business comes through the kitchen in whispers. A shipment that clears customs easy. A landlord who suddenly forgets to raise rent. A cop who looks the other way when the back door stays open late. Protection delivered without asking. A reminder, Josephine takes note, she always does. Then one night a man collapses 2 tables over, not dead, just gasping, sweating, hands clawing at his chest like he's trying to pull something out. The room freezes. Landry doesn't move. He watches Josephine. The man is carried out. Somebody laughs too loud to break the tension. Plates keep moving. Life pretends. Landry waits until closing. "That wasn't you," he says. Josephine wipes a knife clean. "Didn't say it was." He nods. "Good, because if it was, we'd need to talk about boundaries." There it is, not a threat. A line drawn in pencil. Josephine steps closer. "Boundaries only work," she says, "when both sides can enforce them." Landry smiles, thin. "Exactly." He leaves a small envelope on the counter. Doesn't push it toward her. Just leaves it like a man leaving a tip. Inside is money, real money. The kind that buys silence, passage, erasure, and a name, just one, written clean. Josephine doesn't open the envelope until the door closes behind him. The name belongs to a man who owns people on paper and ruins them off it. A man whose table has never gone cold. A man who's been untouchable longer than Wakefield ever dreamed. Landry wants proof, not of her skill, of her loyalty. Josephine stares at the name. This is how the game shifts. You stop punishing the past and start shaping the future. You stop cooking for ghosts and start deciding who gets to eat tomorrow. She burns the envelope, money first, then the paper, but she keeps the name, not because Landry asked, because she was already counting him. Across the city, Landry waits, confident, certain. He doesn't know Josephine never works on commission. She works on balance. And somewhere deep in the kitchen, behind the shelf where the jars sit, she reaches for something she hasn't used yet. Not powder, a blade, clean, sharp, patient. Because if Landry thinks this ends with a meal, he's about to learn some lessons don't come from the pot, and the next move. It won't smell like food at all. Knives don't rush. They wait for the moment flesh forgets they're there. Josephine keeps cooking like nothing changed. Same rhythm, same calm, same steady fire. That's what fools people. They think danger announces itself. They think evil bangs on the door. Real danger pours wine and asks how your day has been. Landry's man, the name from the envelope, shows up 3 nights later. He doesn't sit. Doesn't order. Just stands near the back, pretending to admire the room while counting exits. The kind of man who thinks being careful makes him invisible. Josephine clocks him the second he steps in. He leaves before midnight. That's when she knows he's already made up his mind. The next morning, word moves fast. Quiet but fast. That man was found near the docks, alive but ruined. Couldn't speak, couldn't eat, wouldn't let anyone near his mouth. Kept clawing at his throat like something was still stuck there. Doctors call it shock, priests call it guilt. Landry calls it a message. He comes back that night later than usual after the city's gone thin and mean. He doesn't sit at his regular table. He takes the one closest to the kitchen, closer than comfort. "You didn't poison him," he says. Josephine sets a pot down gently. "No." "You didn't feed him anything." "No." Landry exhales through his nose. "Then you're more dangerous than I thought." She meets his eyes. "You still breathing," she says, "means I'm still deciding." Silence, then Landry laughs, not loud, not kind. "I misjudged you," he says, "thought you were vengeance." Josephine wipes her hands. "I'm correction." Landry nods slowly. "Then we can work." She shakes her head, just once. "No," she says, "we can coexist." He stiffens. "On what terms?" Josephine leans forward just enough. "You eat here," she says. "You don't own this place. You don't touch my kitchen. You don't take names from my shelves. And you don't send men to test me." Landry's jaw tightens. "And if I don't agree?" Josephine tilts her head, listening to the fire crackle. "Then you'll start forgetting how food tastes," she says, "and I won't be involved at all." That lands. Landry sits back. He understands leverage. He just met someone who doesn't need it explained. "Fine," he says, "we coexist." He stands to leave, then pauses. "One more thing," he adds, "people like us don't get old." Josephine watches him go. "Neither do stories," she murmurs. After he's gone, she locks the door and turns back to the shelves. The jars sit quiet, untouched, history waiting. But her hand doesn't reach for them, not tonight. Tonight she sharpens the blade, because coexistence never lasts. And somewhere in the city, Landry is already wondering whether the safest place at her table might be the farthest seat from her hands. Coexistence is just war wearing a nice coat. Landry keeps his word at first. He eats, pays, leaves tips heavy enough to feel like respect. His men stop asking questions. The kitchen stays untouched. For a while it almost feels balanced. Almost. That's the dangerous part. Because men like Landry don't settle. They measure. They wait for the moment you blink. Josephine feels it before she sees it. The fire's wrong one morning, not colder. Wrong, like someone else stood too close while her back was turned. A drawer slightly out of place. A knife she always sets handle left turned the other way. A test. She doesn't confront him. Confrontation is loud. She adjusts. That night a new face appears at the table. Young, clean, trying too hard to look bored. He eats everything, asks nothing, leaves early. A runner. 2 days later, a shipment meant for Josephine's supplier disappears. No explanation, no apology, just gone. Landry's handwriting without the ink. He shows up the next night like nothing happened. Busy week, he says casually. Josephine pours wine she won't drink. Always is. You ever think about expanding? He asks. Bigger place, more reach. She meets his eyes. Reach for what? He smiles. Control. There it is, no more coats. Josephine sets the bottle down. You're forgetting something. Landry leans in. What's that? You're alive, she says, because I allow it. The smile fades. That's the moment both of them understand coexistence just expired. Landry stands. I tried, he says quietly. That matters to me. Josephine nods. It won't matter to history. He leaves without finishing his meal. That's how you know it's on. That same night, Josephine empties the jars, not into pots, into the river, one by one, slow, respectful, letting the past go where it belongs. She keeps nothing but memory, because the next fight won't be fought with ghosts. It'll be fought with living men who bleed fast and lie slow. And Landry just made the mistake of thinking he was the biggest predator in the room. He forgot something important. Some people don't hunt for power, they hunt to end it. And somewhere between the river and the fire, Josephine chooses her next move, knowing only one of them walks away. When ghosts leave the table, the knives come out. Landry moves first. Not loud, not sloppy, quiet pressure. The kind that makes people around you nervous without knowing why. Licenses get questioned. Suppliers hesitate. A rumor drifts that the woman in the kitchen asks too many questions, knows too much. Josephine feels the net tightening. She lets it. That's the thing about nets. They only work if the catch struggles. She keeps the doors open, keeps the menu tight, keeps her head down just enough to look manageable. Men talk. Men always do, especially when they think a woman's cornered. Landry's lieutenant comes in alone one afternoon, older than the runner, smarter. Scar on his cheek that didn't come from an accident. He doesn't order food. You're impressive, he says. Boss doesn't say that about many people. Josephine chops onions. The blade never slows. He don't know many people. The man smiles. This doesn't have to get ugly. She looks up then, just once. It already is. He leans closer. You disappear, quiet boat south. New name, we make it clean. Josephine sets the knife down carefully. Precision matters. You know what happens, she says, when men like your boss make it clean. He shrugs. People live. She shakes her head. People vanish. Silence stretches. The lieutenant sighs. Then this ends bad. Josephine wipes her hands. Most honest thing you said. That night she closes early, locks the doors, extinguishes the front lights, and waits. Landry comes himself this time. No entourage, no witnesses. Power hates being seen when it's unsure. He doesn't knock. He steps inside like he still owns the air. I offered you a way out, he says. Josephine stands behind the counter, calm, still. You offered me a cage with velvet. Landry circles slowly. You don't have protection anymore. Josephine smiles faintly. Neither do you. He stops. You think I came alone. She gestures toward the back. You think I did. That's when the door behind him closes. Not slammed, just shut. A shape steps out of the shadow. Someone Landry hasn't paid. Someone whose loyalty doesn't bend toward money. Landry's hand moves. Too late. The blade doesn't flash. It slips. Quiet, efficient. Right where breath turns into panic. Landry stumbles, disbelief all over his face. Not fear, shock. Men like him never imagine losing control. Josephine watches him sink. You wanted to own the kitchen, she says softly. Should have respected the cook. Landry tries to speak. Blood answers instead. When it's over, Josephine doesn't rush. She cleans the blade, wipes the counter, rights the chair he knocked over. By morning, Landry's gone, no body found, no story told, just a city waking up lighter like something heavy finally stopped breathing. Josephine opens the doors again. New day, new fire, different kind of power now, not loud, not flashy, just enough. And somewhere deep in the city, men who used to laugh too hard over dinner start choosing quieter tables, wondering when food stopped tasting safe. Power hates a vacuum, but it hates a witness even more. Landry's absence doesn't make noise at first. No sirens, no questions, just a pause. A ripple in the water where a big body used to move. Men notice. They always do. Meetings get postponed. Deals slow down. Names stop being spoken out loud and start getting written down instead. The kind of change you feel before you understand it. Josephine keeps cooking. That's what makes people nervous. If she ran, they'd relax. If she closed shop, they'd breathe easier. But she doesn't. She opens every morning, buys her produce, lights her fire, serves plates like the world didn't just lose one of its loudest voices. That tells the right people everything. A week after Landry disappears, a stranger takes a seat at the counter, doesn't order right away, doesn't smile, wears plain clothes that cost more than most houses, hands clean, nails trimmed, the kind of man who never had to threaten anyone himself. I hear this place changes people, he says eventually. Josephine pours water. Only if they come in hungry. He nods. I'm not hungry. That's worse. I represent interests, he says, ones that don't appreciate disruption. Josephine meets his eyes. Disruption to who? He considers her, men who keep things predictable. She almost laughs. Predictable, she repeats, like plantations. The man doesn't flinch, like profit. Silence settles between them, heavy, measured. You killed Landry, he says calmly. Josephine doesn't deny it. I corrected him, she says. The man exhales. That creates imbalance. Josephine leans in slightly. So does letting men like him live. He studies her longer now, recalculating. There are people above him, he says. People you don't see, don't cook for, don't scare with stories. Josephine nods. Yet. That word lands wrong. The man stands, leaves money on the counter untouched. You're dangerous, he says. Not because of what you do, because you don't need permission. Josephine watches him go. Neither do consequences. After he leaves, she locks the door early, not from fear, from instinct. She goes to the back room and opens a crate she hasn't touched since leaving the low country. Inside are papers, names, roots, old contacts who owe favors and remember her son's name without being told. She's not building revenge anymore, she's building reach. Outside, footsteps pause near the door, not one set, several. Josephine stills, listens. Power didn't like being corrected, and it just brought friends. She reaches for the light, then stops. Sometimes the smartest move isn't to be seen at all. And somewhere on the other side of that door, men are deciding whether tonight ends in a warning. Or a war they won't walk away from. The footsteps don't rush. That's how she knows they're professionals. 4, maybe 5 men, shoes soft, breathing controlled, no drunken laughter. No shouted threats. These ain't street muscle. These are the kind of men who believe paperwork is more dangerous than pistols. They stop outside her door. Nobody knocks. One of them tests the handle, slow, gentle, like he's checking a pulse. Locked. Josephine doesn't move. The kitchen behind her is dark, fire banked low, just enough glow to paint the edges of pots and steel. The place smells clean, honest, like nothing bad ever happened here. That's a lie she learned to perfect. A voice comes through the door, calm, educated. Miss Josephine, it says, we only want to talk. She almost smiles. Men always want to talk when they think the outcome's already decided. She steps closer to the back wall, where the shadows fold deeper. Where a narrow passage leads to places no customer's ever seen. Old buildings always have secrets. You just have to listen to them. Talking happens at tables, she says softly, not raising her voice. Y'all didn't bring plates. A pause, then another voice colder. You've caused disruptions. That tends to shorten conversations. Josephine reaches under the counter. Not for a knife. Not for a gun, for a ledger, thin, wrapped in oilcloth, names written careful, dates, Locations, not accusations, accounting. She slides it into the wall cavity she prepared weeks ago, pushes the brick back into place. Because if tonight goes bad, someone else needs to find that book. The door creaks, not forced, picked, professional. One man steps inside, silhouette filling the frame. Then another. They spread out instinctively, controlling angles, exits, space. Josephine steps forward into the half-light. "So," she says calmly, "which one of you decided I was a problem?" The first man studies her. "All of us." She nods. That's usually how it starts. Behind them, somewhere in the street, a carriage rolls past. Life continuing like it always does when something's about to end. The man closest to her reaches into his coat. Slow, deliberate. Josephine's hand tightens around the small object in her pocket. Not a weapon, not poison, a key. To a door none of them know exists yet. "Last chance," the man says. "You can still disappear." Josephine looks past him, toward the dark, toward the future she already accepted. "I already did," she says. And right as the lights outside flicker just once, the sound of another door opening echoes from somewhere behind them. Not loud, not close, but enough to make every man in that room hesitate, because hesitation is where plans break. And tonight somebody miscalculated who was really surrounded. Hesitation lasts half a heartbeat, that's all it takes. The men turn just enough. Trained instincts pulling their attention backward toward the sound they can't place. Not panic, assessment. But assessment still costs time. Josephine moves in that space. She doesn't run. She steps sideways, melts into the angle where shadow swallows shape. The kitchen isn't a room to her. It's a map. Every creak, every loose board, every place heat taught wood to bend just enough. The man nearest the door recovers first. "Clear the..." He doesn't finish. The back door opens wider now, not fast, not slow, purposeful. A figure fills it, broad shoulders, familiar walk, someone who's been quiet a long time and decided to stop being patient. A favor finally called in. The room explodes into motion. One man lunges, another reaches for steel, too late to stay clean now. Josephine stays out of the center, always. That's where people die loud. She moves around the edges where decisions get made. A body hits the prep table hard. Metal rings. A gun clatters and slides across the floor, useless. Someone grunts. Someone swears. The men realize something at the same time. This wasn't a negotiation. This was containment. Josephine steps back toward the wall, hands empty, eyes calm. She watches the fight the way a chess player watches a clock, not invested in the noise, only the outcome. The first man goes down, then the second, not dead, not yet, neutralized. The third backs toward the door, breathing fast now, control slipping. "You're dead," he spits, "all of you." Josephine finally speaks. "No," she says, "you're going to be quiet." The man runs, bad choice. The alley behind the kitchen isn't empty. It never is. The city keeps receipts in its back passages. A sharp sound, a choke of breath. Then silence, heavy and final. Inside, the last man sinks to his knees, hands up, eyes wide. He's young. New. Thought this was a job, not a reckoning. "Please," he says. "I was told this was simple." Josephine crouches in front of him, calm, measured. "So was my son's life," she replies. She doesn't touch him. She doesn't have to. The man behind her steps forward and does what needs doing. Quiet, final, no mess that matters. When it's done, the kitchen settles back into itself, like it always does after heat. Josephine exhales once. Outside, the city keeps breathing. Unaware, unconcerned, she walks to the sink, washes her hands. Long, thorough, like she's done 100 times before. Then she looks at the man who came through the back door. "You didn't have to," she says. He meets her gaze. "I wanted to." She nods. That's how this spreads. She opens the wall, takes the ledger back, feels its weight. Proof. Insurance. Leverage the kind men fear most. Somewhere tonight, powerful people will wake up missing pieces of their plan. Missing men, missing certainty. They won't know her name, they won't need to, because from this night forward, the city understands something it hasn't felt in a long time. There's a woman in the game who doesn't ask permission. And the next move, it won't come with footsteps at the door. It'll come with silence where power used to be. Silence is louder after blood. By morning, the alley is clean, too clean. The kind of clean that makes smart people stop asking questions. A broken crate, a scuffed wall. Nothing that tells a story unless you already know how to read one. Josephine opens the kitchen like always. Same hour, same calm, same fire. That's what unnerves the city. Not the rumors, not the missing men. The routine. When violence changes nothing on the surface, it means it's been absorbed, controlled. By noon, she feels it, the shift. Suppliers who used to talk too much now just nod. Men who once leaned on the counter keep their distance. A police officer pauses at the door, considers stepping in, then decides he's suddenly not hungry. Word has moved without words. That night, no powerful men come, just workers, dock hands, women with tired eyes, people who eat to live, not to prove something. The food tastes the same, honest, safe. That matters too. After closing, Josephine sits alone at the back table with the ledger open. Names crossed out, lines drawn through power like debts finally paid. She doesn't rush the reading. Some pages aren't finished yet. A knock comes, not heavy, not sneaky, respectful. She doesn't answer right away. The knock comes again, same rhythm. She opens the door. Two men stand there, older, careful, suits worn thin at the elbows, union types, organizers. The kind of men who learned long ago that shouting gets you buried. "We were told," one says slowly, "that you might listen." Josephine studies them. Depends who's talking. The man nods. People who don't have a table. That gets her attention. They step inside, sit where they're told, keep their hands visible, smart. "There's pressure coming," the second man says. "From above where Landry sat, they're reorganizing." Josephine pours coffee. "They always do." "We're not here to stop you," the first adds. "We're here to survive what comes next." Josephine leans back, considers. "Survival," she says, "costs discipline." They nod together. "We can pay." Outside, the city hums. Carts, voices. Life pretending it's not balanced on the edge of something new. Josephine closes the ledger. For the first time since Wakefield burned, she isn't counting enemies. She's counting allies, and that's a different kind of danger. Because when power starts to organize against power, the next fire doesn't stay contained to one room. It takes blocks, maybe cities, and Josephine already knows. Once you step into that kind of game, there's no walking back to the kitchen. Allies change the math. Enemies come at you straight. Allies come with angles. Josephine listens more than she talks. That's how she's always worked. Let men explain themselves. Let them reveal what they want to protect. The two across from her speak careful, choosing words like they're stepping across thin ice. They talk about docks, about wages that disappear before they hit a man's pocket, about foremen who decide who eats and who waits, about pressure building in places nobody in fine coats ever visits. Josephine hears something else underneath it all. Timing. "You didn't come just to warn me," she says finally. The older one nods. "No, ma'am. We came because they're going to make an example." "Of who?" she asks. The second man answers. "Of anyone who proves power can bleed." That lands heavy. Josephine stands and walks to the stove, more out of habit than need. She turns a knob that doesn't need turning. Fire steadies her thinking. "They'll squeeze you first," she says, not looking back. "Then they'll squeeze me." "That's the order," the first man agrees. She turns to face them. "And when they're done." The men exchange a look. "Then they'll tighten everything." Josephine exhales slowly. This is Wakefield. This is Landry. This is structure. Systems don't scream, they grind. "You got names?" she asks. They hesitate, just a beat too long. Josephine's voice sharpens, not loud. "If you want me standing in front of this, I need to see the whole board." The older man reaches into his coat and pulls out folded paper. Not a list. A web. Companies, shells, judges, port authorities. Money moving in circles meant to confuse. Josephine studies it. Then she folds it back up and hands it to him. "You keep that," she says. "If they catch you with it, you're already dead." She reaches for her ledger instead, opens it to a blank page. "I don't fight shadows," she continues. "I fight habits, patterns, men who think nobody's watching." She writes one name, then another. These ones, she says, tapping the page, they still eat where they shouldn't, they still talk when they should listen. The second man swallows. You're talking about starting something. Josephine closes the book. No, she says. I'm talking about ending something that's overstayed. They sit with that. Outside, a whistle blows down by the river. Shift change. The city turning over like a tired body. You help me keep my kitchen standing, Josephine says. I'll help you make sure theirs never feels safe again. The men stand, respectful, careful. That's all we ask, one says. As they leave, Josephine locks the door and leans against it for a moment, not tired, focused. Because now the game has layers, and layers mean exposure. She looks at the fire one more time before killing it. All right, she murmurs. Let's see who's really hungry. Somewhere out there, men with clean hands and dirty money are already making plans. They just don't know yet. The cook stopped counting bodies. She's counting collapses. Collapses don't announce themselves either. They look like accidents, like coincidence, like bad timing stacked on bad timing until men start arguing with mirrors. It begins small. A shipment held at the docks for no clear reason. Paperwork misplaced. A foreman pulled aside by a clerk who suddenly remembers a rule nobody enforced yesterday. A judge who used to sign anything without reading now asks for clarification twice. Nothing that can be traced, everything that can be felt. Josephine keeps her kitchen steady. That's the cover, steam rising, knives working, plates moving. The rhythm never breaks even as the city's pulse stutters. Men still come in loud. They just don't leave that way. One of them, name tied to 3 warehouses and a string of broken backs, compliments the stew too much. Tries to joke his way through a tension he can't explain. You put something different in this? He asks. Josephine smiles faintly. You noticing things now? He laughs, doesn't finish his bowl. Another man skips dinner entirely. Sits, drinks, watches the door like it might accuse him. Leaves early, tips heavy, tips nervous. The union men don't brag, they don't celebrate, they just report outcomes. Doc 3's down for a week. Judge Harlan recused himself. 2 investors pulled out overnight. Josephine nods, marking nothing down. This isn't about keeping score anymore, it's about pressure. You don't break a structure by hitting it once. You lean until it remembers gravity, then something changes. A new face appears at the counter, doesn't fit the pattern, too calm, too still, not watching exits. Watching her, he orders nothing, just water. Kitchen still open. He asks. Josephine meets his eyes, depends who's asking. He smiles slightly, someone who doesn't eat in public. That's a problem. You're early, she says. He tilts his head. You're late. Silence stretches between them, not hostile, evaluative. Men above the docks are nervous, he continues. They think this is you. Josephine dries her hand slowly. And you? I think, he says, this started before them, and it won't end with them. That's not a threat. That's recognition. He slides a folded card across the counter. No name, just a symbol pressed deep enough to scar the paper. People like me don't step in unless things are about to tip, he says. And right now, the board's tilting. Josephine doesn't touch the card. Then maybe, she replies, y'all should have paid attention sooner. He stands, leaves the card where it is. We'll be watching, he says. She nods. I know. After he's gone, Josephine locks the door earlier than usual. Not because she's afraid, because she understands the signal. This wasn't muscle. This wasn't money. This was oversight. And oversight means the next move won't come from the streets or the docks. It'll come from somewhere clean. Quiet. And very patient. Josephine turns the card over at last, studies the mark. Then she closes her hand around it and blows out the kitchen light. Because when the people above start paying attention, the rules change. And whatever comes next. Someone's going to fall a lot farther than they expect. When clean men get involved, things stop bleeding fast. They suffocate slow. The next morning feels wrong from the jump. No noise outside the kitchen. No carts rattling past. Even the river sounds muted, like it's holding something back. Josephine notices who doesn't show up, 2 regulars gone, 1 supplier delayed indefinitely. A dockhand slips her a look through the window and keeps walking like eye contact alone might cost him. That's pressure from above. Not threats. Not violence. Isolation. By noon, the union men don't come either. Not even a message. That tells her more than words ever could. When allies go quiet all at once, it means someone higher up told them to breathe shallow. Josephine doesn't chase answers. She adapts. She closes early and moves through the city instead. No apron, no headscarf, just another woman in a crowd that doesn't see her coming. She listens in doorways. She reads faces. She follows the gaps where conversation stops. And the same name keeps surfacing, not spoken fully, just hinted. The board, the circle, men who don't touch money directly, they move signatures, permits, judges, they don't need muscle because they own time. Josephine stops at a church near the river, not to pray, to think. Old stone walls remember things, they've watched power rise and rot before. That's where she spots him again. The man with the clean hands, standing across the street, not hiding, not approaching, just letting her see him. He tips his hat once. Invitation. They sit on opposite ends of a long bench inside, sunlight cutting the space between them like a blade. "You're disrupting flows," he says quietly. "Men are losing confidence." "Confidence shouldn't come from chains," she answers. He smiles faintly. "That's not how the world works." Josephine leans back. "That's how it changes." He studies her now, no pretense. "You think you're building something better. You're not. You're tearing holes in a system that will crush whoever stands underneath it." Josephine meets his gaze. Then it was already broken. Silence again. "You could still step away," he says. "Leave the city, take your story with you." She shakes her head. "Stories don't leave, they spread." The man exhales. "Then you leave us no choice." Josephine stands. "You never had one." They part without shaking hands. That night the first official notice arrives at her door. Clean paper, clean language, her kitchen flagged for violations that never existed yesterday. That's the move. Paper cuts first. Blood later. Josephine pins the notice to the wall and stares at it. Then she smiles, because now it's official. They didn't come to warn her, they came to erase her. And erasure, that's dangerous. Because when you try to wipe someone out quietly, you better make sure they didn't already carve their name into the foundation. Josephine reaches for the ledger, opens to a page she hoped she'd never need. At the top, written steady and sure, is a single word. Architects. And somewhere above the city, men who never thought they'd be seen just felt the first crack beneath their feet. Architects don't get their hands dirty. That's why they panic when the ground shifts. The inspection comes fast. Too fast. 3 men in pressed coats, eyes already bored, clipboards clean as confession. They don't taste the food. They don't step into the kitchen. They just point, measure, write, violations, improper storage, unlicensed modifications, temporary closure. Temporary always means permanent when paper is doing the killing. Josephine listens without interrupting, lets them finish, lets them feel important. When they leave, she locks the door behind them and turns the sign to closed. Outside, someone across the street pretends not to watch. Inside, the kitchen feels smaller, quieter. Like a ring before the bell, Josephine doesn't fight the closure. That's what surprises everyone. No shouting, no lawyers, no appeal. She lets the doors stay shut, lets the fire go cold, lets the rumor spread that the cook finally got contained. Men upstairs relax. That's mistake number 1. Because when a woman like her goes quiet, it doesn't mean surrender. It means relocation. That night she opens the ledger fully. Not names this time, structures, routes. Who signs what, who eats where, who drinks too much when the week's gone bad. The union men reappear after midnight, nervous but present. She doesn't scold them. Fear is currency. Everyone pays eventually. "They're cleaning house," one whispers. "Anybody connected to you is getting squeezed." Josephine nods. "Good." They blink. "Good." "Means they're exposed," she says. "You don't protect something unless it's fragile." She hands them pages torn clean from the ledger. Not originals, copies. Enough to scare the right people without pointing straight back to her. These go to 3 different hands, she says. If anything happens to me, the rest go public. One of the men swallows. This could start something big. Josephine meets his eyes. It already has. By dawn, the city wakes to whispers. Contracts frozen, accounts questioned. A judge calls in sick and doesn't come back. A board member's name surfaces in a place it shouldn't. The architects feel it now, and they don't like feeling. That afternoon, the man with clean hands appears again, not at the kitchen, at her door. Alone, no clipboard, no smile. This ends tonight, he says. Josephine doesn't invite him in. Everything ends, she replies. Question is who writes the last line. He steps closer. You think you're untouchable. She shakes her head. I think you're late. Somewhere down the street, an engine idles too long. Somewhere else, a door closes that shouldn't be closed yet. The man's eyes flick past her just for a second. Josephine sees it, fear, real fear. And in that moment she knows. The architects didn't come to erase her. They came to negotiate, which means they're already losing. She steps aside, letting him enter. Not because she trusts him, because you never let power talk from the hallway. You bring it inside, where the walls remember everything. And behind them, unseen, something moves into position. Quiet, patient, ready to decide who doesn't leave the room. Legacy is the longest game there is. You don't feel it right away, that's the trick. The city doesn't explode. Nobody kicks down doors, no public arrests, no speeches, just shifts, subtle ones. Like a river changing course before you notice the bank is gone. Josephine feels it in the invitations that stop coming. Not threats, not warnings, silence. Men who once tested her now avoid the block entirely, not because they're afraid of her hands, but because someone told them her name isn't worth saying out loud. That's power adapting. She reopens the kitchen under a different arrangement. Smaller, quieter. No sign. No name painted on glass. People find it because they need to, not because it's advertised. That's how real influence moves. The union men still come, but now they sit farther apart, careful. They talk about progress in past tense like it already belongs to history. Things stabilized, one says. Josephine stirs a pot. Stability for who? He doesn't answer. That's when she knows the architects didn't lose, they absorbed, and absorption is worse. One night, a young woman waits after closing, too clean, too calm, eyes sharp like she learned early not to blink. They sent me, the woman says. Josephine doesn't ask who. They said you'd understand, she continues. This is the new way. You keep cooking, keep helping who you help, just smaller, quieter, no ripples. Josephine wipes her hands slowly. And if I don't, she asks. The woman hesitates. Then someone else tells your story. That's the threat, not death, replacement. Josephine looks at the girl for a long moment, sees hunger there, ambition, fear dressed up as purpose. She nods once. Sit. The girl sits. Josephine serves her a simple bowl. No tricks, no depth, just food. Eat, she says. The girl does. Halfway through, she pauses. It's good, she admits. But it feels empty. Josephine leans in. That's what power tastes like when it's stripped of memory. The girl looks up. What are you saying? I'm saying, Josephine replies softly, they don't want me quiet, they want me erased. The girl swallows. Then why am I here? Josephine smiles, just barely. Because legacy doesn't belong to the loudest men, she says. It belongs to the ones who remember why the fire was lit in the first place. She stands and opens the ledger one last time. Not to names, to recipes, real ones, written careful, passed forward. You can take this back, Josephine says, sliding a single page across the table, or you can learn what it means. The girl's hand hovers. Outside, footsteps pass, slow, observing, the city waiting again. And Josephine knows this is the moment that decides whether her story ends as a warning or becomes a blueprint. She watches the girl's fingers inch closer to the page and waits, because the most dangerous betrayals are the ones that haven't happened yet. The girl doesn't touch the page, not right away. That pause tells Josephine everything. People who reach too fast want power. People who hesitate are afraid of what it costs. Outside, footsteps stop. One set, maybe two, close enough now that the building feels smaller, like the walls leaned in to hear the decision. Josephine doesn't look toward the door. She keeps her eyes on the girl. "You already chose," Josephine says quietly. "You just haven't admitted which way." The girl's jaw tightens. "They said you were dangerous." Josephine nods. "Dangerous to who?" Silence. The girl exhales. "They said you make people forget where they stand." Josephine smiles, slow and knowing. "No, I make them remember." The girl finally picks up the page. Her fingers tremble just enough. It's not a recipe the way she expected. No measurements. No ingredients listed clean, just notes. Timing, heat, pressure, who the food is meant for and who it is never meant to touch. At the bottom, written steady. Every meal decides a side. The girl looks up. "This isn't cooking." Josephine leans closer. "Neither is what they've been feeding you." A sound at the door now. A knuckle light against wood, not a knock. A reminder. The girl flinches. "They're here," she whispers. Josephine nods. "I know." "You could leave," the girl says quickly. "Right now, I'll tell them you weren't here." Josephine's voice stays calm. "And you?" The girl swallows. "I'll say I handled it." That's the betrayal, not spoken yet, but chosen. Josephine straightens. "For what it's worth," she says, "you would have been good if you'd come sooner." The girl's eyes widen. "What does that mean?" Josephine steps past her toward the back of the kitchen, toward the passage no inspector ever noticed, the one that remembers her weight. "It means," Josephine says, "they didn't send you to learn." The door at the front opens. Boots on wood. Confident now. The girl turns, torn between the page in her hand and the men stepping inside. Josephine pauses at the threshold of shadow and light. "You were sent to replace me," she says. The girl doesn't deny it. Josephine nods once. "Then listen carefully," she adds, "because replacements inherit everything." She disappears into the passage as voices rise behind her. Shouts, orders, confusion. And in the kitchen, standing alone with a page she doesn't fully understand, the girl realizes something too late. The fire wasn't passed to her, it was aimed, and whatever happens next, someone is about to learn what it costs to wear another woman's legacy without earning it. The passage closes behind Josephine without a sound. That's the detail nobody ever remembers later. They'll say she vanished, slipped away, melted into the city. But the truth is quieter than that. She chose when to stop being seen. Back in the kitchen, boots spread out, drawers pulled, shelves checked. Men moving fast now, irritated that certainty didn't come with the job. The girl stands frozen near the table. One of the men looks at her. "Where is she?" The girl opens her mouth. Nothing comes out. That's when panic shows up. Not loud, tight. The kind that crawls under your skin and starts asking questions you don't want to answer. "She was here," the girl finally says. "She just..." "Just what?" Another man snaps. The girl looks down at the page in her hand, reads the last line again. Every meal decides a side. Her throat tightens. "She left," the girl says, "through somewhere you didn't know to look." The men curse. One heads for the back wall, pounding on brick like anger might open it. Another radios in, voice clipped, controlled, already rewriting the failure as a delay. Outside, footsteps multiply. Containment. The girl feels it then, the weight of the room. The ledger that's gone. The fire that isn't lit. The absence louder than any explosion. "You said she was finished," one of the men says into the radio. "She's not." Silence answers him. Across the city, Josephine moves through streets that don't remember her face. She keeps to places where names change and stories overlap, where women pass knowledge hand to hand without writing it down. She doesn't run. She never has. She walks with purpose, carrying nothing but what can't be taken. Back in the kitchen, the girl finally understands the trap. If Josephine lives, the architects lose control of the story. If Josephine dies, the girl inherits a legacy she can't carry without being crushed by it. Either way, the page in her hand is burning now, not with fire, with meaning. One of the men turns to her slowly. "You didn't tell us everything." The girl meets his eyes. "No," she says, "I didn't." Outside, sirens rise somewhere far off. Not for this. Never for this. And somewhere in the city, unseen and uncounted, Josephine pauses long enough to listen to the noise she left behind. She doesn't smile. She doesn't look back. Because the most dangerous phase of the game just began. The part where power hunts a woman who no longer needs a kitchen. Only time. And somebody very soon is going to make the mistake of thinking she's alone. Hunting changes a man, makes him loud inside his own head. The architects don't put her name on paper. They don't say it in rooms with windows. They use phrases instead. Unresolved variable, loose thread. That's how men like that sleep at night, by turning people into math. Josephine hears about it without hearing it. A woman at a market stall pauses too long before handing back change. A man on a corner stops whistling when she passes. A room goes quiet half a second too early. That's the city talking. She keeps moving. No kitchen now. No fire to tend. Just timing, roots, faces. She trades favors she never wrote down. A bed for a night. A warning for a warning. Memory still spends even when money doesn't. They search wrong. They look for rage, for revenge, for a woman desperate to strike back. They don't understand that Josephine already burned the part of herself that needed that. What's left is strategy. Back in the old kitchen, the girl is being shaped fast, too fast. They sit her at tables she doesn't belong at yet, ask her questions with smiles that don't reach their eyes, hand her responsibility like a test she didn't study for. She feels it slipping. The ledger isn't there. The weight isn't there. The ghosts don't answer her the way they answered Josephine. One of the men leans in close one night, voice low. "You're not her." The girl flinches. "No," he says, "you're proof she mattered." That's when the girl realizes the truth. She was never meant to replace Josephine. She was meant to fail in her shad. Across town, Josephine listens to a conversation through a half-open door. Not about her, about fear, about how long it's been since someone couldn't be controlled. "They're watching the wrong people," a voice says. "She's already moved past us." Josephine steps away before she's seen. Good. Let them think that, because the game now isn't about hiding, it's about patience. And patience done right feels like peace right before it turns into collapse. Josephine stops at a bridge as dawn starts to stretch the sky thin. Water moves underneath, carrying secrets the way cities do. She touches the inside of her coat. No jar, no blade, no ledger, just time. And time, used correctly, ruins empires quieter than fire ever could. Behind her, somewhere far off, a decision is being made. A bad one. The kind that comes from pride and impatience. Josephine hears it coming before it happens. She always does. And when it does, she won't be reacting, she'll be finishing. The mistake doesn't come fast, it comes arrogant. One of the architects gets tired of waiting. That's always how it goes. Patience looks good on paper, but ego leaks through eventually. Men who built their power behind desks forget what it feels like when the ground answers back. So they decide to make it visible, not Josephine, the story. They leak it wrong. A quiet article passes through the city, printed small, buried where respectable eyes won't linger too long. Talks about a dangerous agitator, a woman who poisoned men, burned houses, disrupted commerce. They dress it up clean, no names. Just enough shape for fear to recognize itself. They think they're burying her. What they're really doing is admitting she existed, and that's the first crack. Because stories don't stay where you put them, they drift. They get picked up, twisted, retold, in kitchens, on docks, in rooms where men don't read papers but remember faces. Josephine hears about it 3 different ways before noon. A fishmonger pauses mid-sentence. A woman on a stoop says, "Sound like that cook, don't it?" A man laughs and says, "They still scared of her." Scared, that word tells her everything. She doesn't correct the story, she doesn't deny it. Denial is for the guilty. Instead, she moves. Not toward the architects, toward their scaffolding. A clerk who signs permits starts sleeping poorly. A banker's wife hears something at a dinner she shouldn't have. A junior judge finds his name attached to a document he never saw before. Nothing illegal, everything undeniable. The girl still stuck in the kitchen that isn't hers feels it collapse first. The smiles stop. The questions sharpen. Men stop pretending she's enough. One night she's called in late. Different room, different table, same cold faces. "You didn't deliver," one of them says. She swallows. "She's gone." Another man leans forward. "No, she's working." The girl's voice trembles. "I don't know where." They exchange a look. That's the moment the girl understands the final truth. They never wanted Josephine dead. They wanted her contained. And now she is. Across the city, Josephine stands in the dark of a borrowed room, listening to the city breathe. She doesn't smile, she doesn't rush. Because now they've done the one thing power can't undo. They said her name without saying it. They made her real. And when a system admits a threat exists, it has already lost control of the ending. Josephine turns toward the door. The last phase doesn't need fire. It doesn't need knives. It needs one clean exposure. And the right moment to let it fall. Outside, somewhere important, a phone rings. And someone very high up is about to realize the story they tried to bury. Just learned how to speak. Power hates witnesses more than enemies. Enemies can be crushed. Witnesses just wait. The call reaches a room that never gets surprised. Thick walls. Heavy curtains. Men who think they're invisible because they sit above the noise. The kind of place where decisions get made and nobody signs their name. The voice on the other end isn't panicked. That's the problem. "It's spreading," the voice says. Not the woman, the connections. Silence follows, long, sharp. "What connections?" A man finally asks. "The permits, the judges, the shell companies. Somebody lined them up so clean it looks intentional." Another pause. "Who?" Someone demands. The answer comes slower this time. "No one we can touch." That's when the room shifts. Because power can survive scandal, it can survive death. It cannot survive clarity. Across the city, the girl is breaking. They keep her late again. Different faces, same pressure. They don't shout. They don't threat. They just keep asking the same questions from different mouths until answers start slipping. "You read the page," one says. "You spoke to her," says another. "You hesitated," a third adds. The girl realizes she's the liability now. And liabilities don't get second chances. That night she doesn't go back to the kitchen. She runs. Straight to the only person who told her the truth without asking for loyalty. Josephine listens without interrupting as the girl pours it out. The fear. The guilt, the understanding that came too late. "They're going to clean it up," the girl whispers. "They'll erase everything, even you." Josephine studies her for a long moment. Then she asks one question. "Did you bring anything?" The girl nods and pulls a folded packet from her coat. Copies, signatures, roots. The pieces Josephine couldn't move without exposing herself. Josephine takes them carefully. "This isn't revenge. This is succession." "You don't get to be me," Josephine says quietly, "but you can decide who you're not." The girl's voice breaks. What happens now? Josephine looks toward the window, where the city glows like it always has, hungry and forgetful. "Now," she says, "you disappear for real." She hands the girl a small bundle, money, papers, a route written in shorthand that won't make sense to anyone else. "And you?" the girl asks. Josephine doesn't answer right away, because this part matters. "I stay," she says finally, "just not where they're looking." By morning, the documents surface where they hurt the most. Not headlines, not trials. Reviews, audits, quiet resignations. A man steps down for health reasons. Another leaves town suddenly. A third locks his office door and never comes back. No explosions, just rot exposed to air. Up top, the architects understand what happened too late. They tried to control a story. Instead, they handed it a voice. And somewhere between the first resignation and the last unanswered phone call, Josephine walks into the crowd and vanishes again, leaving behind something far more dangerous than fire, a memory that refuses to stay buried. They never call it defeat. Men like that don't use the word, they call it restructuring, retirement, a necessary correction, but the city feels the difference. The phones stop ringing at night. The permits start moving again, but slower, cleaner. The men who used to laugh loud in back rooms start choosing booths near exits. That's how you know something ended. Not clean, not complete, but final enough. Josephine doesn't watch the fallout from a window or a headline. She feels it in the way people breathe easier without knowing why. In the way kitchens start feeding people instead of serving symbols. In the way fear stops being decorative and starts being selective. She stays invisible on purpose. No more kitchens with her name attached. No more places that belong to her alone. She moves through other people's fires now, teaches without teaching, corrects without commanding, a hand on a wrist before a mistake, a sentence whispered before a bad deal, a recipe passed that isn't about food at all. Some nights, someone asks about her. Not directly. They say things like, "You ever hear about that cook?" Or they say, "A woman once ran this whole thing without anyone noticing." The answers are always the same. Nah. Just a story. Probably exaggerated. That's how legends survive. The girl never comes back, that's good. Survival isn't loud. Years later, Josephine hears she opened a small place somewhere south. Nothing fancy. Feeds people who don't ask questions, keeps her head down. She earned that. As for the architects, some still sit in clean rooms, telling themselves they adapted. Others disappeared into quiet retirements. A few learned too late that power without silence is just noise waiting to collapse. None of them ever say her name. They don't have to. Because every time a deal stalls for no clear reason. Every time a man wakes up uneasy without knowing why. Every time a room goes quiet when someone starts talking too much. That's her, not a ghost, a correction. Josephine stands one evening at the edge of the city, watching smoke rise from 100 kitchens she doesn't own and never will. She touches nothing, needs nothing. The fire doesn't belong to her anymore. It belongs to the people who learned what it was really for. And somewhere, deep inside the systems that once thought they were eternal, something still whispers. Careful, she's been here before and she's patient. They never find a body, that's the part that bothers them most. No grave, no trial, no ending they can point to and say there, that's where it stopped. Years pass. The city grows. New men take old seats. Same tables, different suits. They talk about progress like it's something they invented, but every system remembers where it broke. A permit denied for no reason. A deal that dies in the last hour. A judge who pauses before signing, heart racing, not knowing why. That hesitation, that's legacy. Somewhere along the line, the story changes. The cook becomes a rumor. The rumor becomes a warning. The warning becomes a rule nobody remembers agreeing to. Don't push too hard, don't get greedy, don't forget who you step on. In certain kitchens, there's an unspoken code. Old cooks pass it down without names attached. They talk about heat, about patience, about how food carries memory whether you respect it or not. They say, every meal decides a side. Nobody knows where it came from. Josephine lives long enough to see the city stop hunting her. Not because they forgave her, because they accepted her. That's the real win. She grows older in places that don't ask questions. Her hands slow, but her eyes never do. She watches the next generation try to build power louder, faster, sloppier, and she knows. They'll learn. They always do. One night much later, a young cook asks her why she never opened her own place again. Josephine smiles, faint and private. Because owning something, she says, makes people think they can take it. The fire crackles low. Outside, the city hums, hungry as ever. Josephine closes her eyes for a moment, listening, not to noise but to balance. Then she stands, wipes her hands, and steps away from the heat. No applause, no farewell. Just a woman leaving a kitchen exactly the way she always did. With the fire low. The lesson set. And power wondering, one last time, who really ran the game.